Hey everyone, Alodar here. Yesterday, Blizzard decided to release a bit of a statement as to the state of the game for Classic World of Warcraft. For those of us that are extremely excited about them re-releasing Vanilla World of Warcraft on Blizzard servers, it came a little bit unexpectedly. I wasn't really expecting anything to be released, any information, any new information, anyways, to be released until after Battle for Azeroth, perhaps around BlizzCon. I know there've been a few people that have been talking about how Blizzard needs to release more information, etc., etc. I was not actually expecting them to release anything this soon, so I'm very excited in the fact that they have. So they basically went over the progress that they've made, where they're at, and just kind of giving a little bit of an update. So I'd like to go over that now. There is a little bit of information that they've given, but if you look at the information that they've given, you can really get a good idea as to where they're at. So this is the release that they gave. I'll leave a link to this down below in the description. So feel free to read it on your own, but we're going to go over the basics here. One thing that you'll notice right away is they talk about these first prototypes and a second prototype, and I haven't really seen many people talk about these well, they've talked about the prototypes, but maybe not so much in the sense of when they were using those prototypes. So if you remember back to BlizzCon, or even before BlizzCon, when the Nostalrius crew was flown out by Blizzard to talk to them, I believe this is kind of when they were using the first prototype as to how they were going to be able to integrate the old version of the game with the new client. And that they've told us forever, well, since they started, basically there's hints that maybe they'd be interested in doing this, that this was basically their major hurdle. And so when the Nostalrius group went out, they played with an old version of the server, and they talk about that here. They don't actually mention that this is when they talk about it, but I think you can kind of get an idea as to they've got this patch 1.12, which is the same patch that Nostalrius is using. They probably had their own copy of it. That of course was the Drums of War patch, which we talk about a little bit later. And they use it as their foundation. The reason why they use that as their foundation is because it represents the most complete version of the classic experience. Now, this is Blizzard's words. Some people are going to be disappointed by that. I personally am happy. There's a reason why most private servers come out with patch 1.12. When most people think back to Classic, that's kind of the patch that they remember towards the end. There was a lot of issues with the game, not just class balancing issues, but just bugs and all that sort of stuff. For those of us that played beta, and then when the game was actually launched, the first couple of days were a complete nightmare. You'd sit in queue. Many people in my guild would sit in queue for 6 or 8 hours. They get into the game, play for about 20 minutes, and then suddenly they'd be kicked out of the game again. And it was absolutely ridiculous for the first at least couple of days. But people were getting kicked from the game nonstop for quite a while into the original release of the game. So that's the sort of thing that, you know, we hopefully don't have to deal with these launches of the new server. So anyways, this first prototype, I think that they were playing with when the Nostalrius crew came, and they were kind of explaining, you know, maybe chit-chatting back and forth with what they need to do in order to get the game working with their current client. It wasn't compatible, and that was the major issue that they were having. It wasn't compatible with modern video cards. It wasn't compatible with their modern client. Their modern security and anti-cheat capabilities weren't working with the modern version of the game, and this was kind of like this was something that they needed to have functioning properly. It's understandable, but so I believe this first prototype that they're talking about here, they were playing around with for a couple of years ago type of thing. So they talk about that, but they don't really go into talking about when this was. Now the second prototype, this first prototype failed ultimately. It wasn't working. They needed to come up with another way for this to work. So essentially what they've done is they've come up with a second prototype. And the reason they had to do this, the major issue is that the file systems with World of Warcraft of today and World of Warcraft of 15 or 14 years ago are completely different. The new file system doesn't read the old stuff. So essentially what they've had to do is they've had to come up with a second prototype that would allow the two to communicate with each other, which I guess that's the easiest way to explain it. So the second prototype, basically what they've done is they've gone in and re-engineered the software and allowed the game data from they've taken the game data from vanilla, re-engineered it so that it can be read by modern day World of Warcraft file systems and stuff like that. So the game should, I actually called a friend to ask him, is there going to be any sort of anything that you're going to notice from a player? And he said with how game development or software developing has changed over the years, you're going to notice that the software probably runs quite a bit smoother. You're not going to have bugs or systems crashing or that sort of thing because the file systems are much better these days. So they go into it in detail. If you want to go into it yourself, you're more than welcome to. But the gist of it though is that they've had to basically re-engineer the software so that the old software is basically readable by today's software. So they go into it a little bit of detail here, where this is essentially how the old software was written, where it would show the effects, and it would tell the program exactly what's happening when certain things are done in game, etc., etc. And they say major work needs to be done in this area to make the modern client compatible with classic data. So they've basically had to redo the classic data so that the current game, the file system from the current game can read the classic data. So they've redone the classic data to be readable by today's file systems that Blizzard's currently using. It's much more organized, much more streamlined, and allows the game to run probably a lot more smoother. This allows them also to be able to adjust the data in the future. Now that I've said that, don't get worried. That's not me saying that, hey, they're going to change vanilla World of Warcraft and they're going to make class adjustments and stuff like that. That's not what they're saying, and that's not what I'm saying. What this does though is it does allow them to make adjustments easier and to be able to make sure that classic WoW is running the way it wants. But there's also one other major thing that it's going to allow them to do in the future, but I'll get to that in a bit. So anyways, they now that the data is going to be able to flow seamlessly, I'm going to assume actually I'm fairly positive that this this second prototype, they've had this running for probably a good 8 or 9 months now, meaning not the whole game, but like they've had this a version of the second prototype where they're able to test the old data with the new file system to make sure it worked. And once they discovered that it did work, this would have been before last BlizzCon 2017. Once they discovered that it was going to work, that's when they realized we can do this. We're able to do this now. We've figured out what we must do. And that's when they then announced BlizzCon. That's the only rationale that I can think of, that because they even talked about at BlizzCon and in other interviews that the major hurdle was that they couldn't get the two file systems to communicate. And then once at BlizzCon they announced, we've figured out some major issues, some major hurdles, and I believe this was the major hurdle that they figured out. So they then announced at BlizzCon. So this second prototype's been being used for 8 months, at least 8-9 months maybe. So that's how far they've been able to play around with this file system. Now, as far as they've then started basically inputting all the old data into the new file systems and stuff like that. One of the things that this does do, well, first of all, let's talk about patch 1.12. Patch 1.12, a lot of people aren't going to be happy. Well, some people aren't going to be happy because you miss a lot of the big patches and you miss kind of the progression. It's already kind of at the end game for vanilla World of Warcraft. That's not going to stop them from having a progression in their game. It's just going to implement like a solid base core for them. And you're probably going to see certain things still come out in progression. Will Battlegrounds be around at the beginning of the initial release of Classic, I don't know. They have the option to do either or. My bet would probably be that they will be available right at release. But I don't know. They haven't told us that. They have the option to turn it on or turn it off. It's not like they can't just, do that. But also there's other things that have changed since the original vanilla, or the initial release of vanilla. Instead of having 6 debuffs on a mob, you can have now up to 16. I believe that came in patch 1.7. I'll check that later, but I'm not going to redo the video if I'm wrong. I think it was patch 1.7 where 16 debuff slots came in, and that changed rating. Suddenly warlocks were much more viable. They could cast more than 1 dot. Feral druids are more viable. Shadow priests one shadow priest was wanted in a raid, et cetera, et cetera. So the change of the classes that made up a 40-man raid changed. It obviously made warlocks do more damage, so bosses were easier to kill, et cetera, et cetera. It kind of had a snowballing effect, right? When they brought that into the game, some people believe the game became too easy. Nax, the release of Nax was, I believe, the patch before 1.12. So people that fought Nax, most people, the overwhelming majority of people never completed Nax, and I don't know that anyone would have completed them if they only had 60 buff slots. I don't know. I'm one of the majority of the people that did not complete it. So, anyways, one of the other things that is in patch 1.12 is cross-server battlegrounds, which when it was first released, I hated it. I absolutely despised it because all I did was play battlegrounds, and I learned to hate certain people on the other team. I got a rush off of killing certain people on the other team. When you saw the people on the other team, you knew them. You hadn't talked to them really, but you knew them. I didn't like the fact that we were never going to fight these people again. It was going to be very random and very rare that you'd fight the same people over again. I like to be able to build up that hatred. However, the benefit was, though, that when they introduced this, a lot of the realms that had huge imbalances for their factions, their queue times for battlegrounds. I knew people that waited in queue for a battleground for an hour. That's ridiculous. But this really dramatically dropped the wait time for a lot of these servers. And anyone who's watched me stream knows how much I absolutely hate queue times for battlegrounds. So, I mean, you got to kind of take you take the bad with the good. If you want the good, there might be something you have to pay off in order to get it. So, I'm not happy that they're going to have cross-realm battlegrounds. They haven't officially said that they're going to, but if they go with patch 1.12, then you're led to believe that it will be in there. Having said that, I hate waiting for queues, so I'm not going to be all up in arms. If I get a 30-second queue as opposed to a 30-minute, I'll deal with it. Another thing that they've said that they're going to be able to be bringing into, I'm not exactly sure where. I think it's right here actually. Additional improvements include modern that they're going to want to make sure are implemented. Modern anti-cheating botting detection, which I'm perfectly fine with. I know that botting was something that we dealt with in vanilla, but maybe it's not a true vanilla experience if we don't have botting. Botting sucked. Okay, it drove up gold prices, etc., etc. People were you could catch bots all over the place. You go kill somebody that was just farming, and you could sit there and wait a couple of minutes and then watch them reappear, and then their macro would kick into effect. They'd bandage themselves or they'd heal themselves. They'd sit down, they'd take a drink, and then they'd target the next mob and then just continue on, not even noticing that you're there, and then you could just kill them again. It was ridiculous, and it just drove up the market. So I'm glad that sort of stuff's come in. Customer service and BattleNet integration. So they had customer service in original vanilla. So but BattleNet itself, I know some people were adamant that they did not want BattleNet. I'm of the side that I don't care. The reason why is because when we played old classic WoW or vanilla, whatever you want to call it, we had programs like ICQ or whatever, where essentially it does the same thing that BattleNet does. I believe, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm fairly positive that back in the day, you could put your ICQ number in your forum posts so that somebody could just click on it, get your ICQ number, and then send you a message to your ICQ, even if you weren't playing on the same faction. So there were ways around to be able to do things that basically Battle.net allows you to do if you add these people as your friends. So, and there's of course Discord and probably multiple other programs that you can use. So I'm not really too worried about Battle.net, to be honest. I was more worried about how authentic they were going to want to have vanilla be. I didn't want them to go into class balancing and all that sort of stuff. So, and then they talk about how they're looking forward to challenges ahead. In the classic game, every code check and data conversion we make brings WoW closer to providing an authentic experience that you and we want. So keep this in mind. This is something that they've said a couple of times. I believe Ian was one who said that vanilla. We know vanilla means vanilla. They've said authentic experience, authentic classic experience. Like they harp this over and over again. So I think a lot of people are trying to read in between the lines a little bit. They're a little bit too pessimistic. I think Blizzard understands that they've got two groups of people that want to play this game. They've got people that are currently playing the current version of the game, and they got people that prefer the old version of the game. And people that come into my stream, when they ask me questions about the game, one of the things that I always tell them, when I used to work in corporations and stuff like that, one of the things that I used to tell people that worked with me was essentially revenue is all that. Revenue is basically what mattered. What's going to generate revenue. They're a corporation. They have to look out for their revenue. And when they're making decisions, they want to generate as much revenue as possible. They know there's a huge chunk of us that want to come and play vanilla. And if it's not done right, we're just not going to play it. So I think that they're making their decisions, their revenue-based decisions on that. So they've already got people that are enjoying the game now. They've got another chunk of people that they'd like to add to that. And that's, I think, where they're going with it. So now and if we continue with the revenue discussion, one of the things that people are not really talking about, which I'm a little surprised by, but now that they've discovered how to integrate the old data to be able to use with the current client of the game, there's nothing stopping them from continuing on after vanilla. And I don't mean continuing on with more patches. I mean continuing on with more expansions. And what I fully expect Blizzard to do now is to fully take as much advantage of this as they can. And what you're going to see is this year Battle for Azeroth is going to come out. Then in a year after that, and the reason I'm saying this is years ago, I believe it was around Mists of Pandaria when it came out, they had an interview and they talked about how they wanted to come out with an expansion every year, and they tried to rush an expansion so that it could come out after a year, and it didn't work. And they wanted to come up with like a major piece that would basically keep people coming back and keep renewing their subscriptions. But they couldn't churn out new expansions fast enough. So what I think you're going to see is a Battle for Azeroth expansion come out in August, and then roughly a year later, you're going to see the Vanilla Classic server come out, and then a year after that, it's going to be the next new expansion. Then a year after that, Burning Crusade. Then a year after that, another new expansion. Then a year after that, Wrath of the Lich King, new expansion. And that's how the revenue is just going to go through the roof when they're doing this. And of course, they can't deny it. That's one of the reasons they're doing it. I mean, it's not just for customer service. It's for their bottom line. The bottom line is the bottom line, is what we used to always say. So keep that in mind. So I think over the next 5 or 6 years, you're probably going to see a major piece of content coming in. And if you think about it, like players like myself, I play the new expansions, and I love playing on the private servers, but every time there's a new expansion, I go back and try it for a bit. I probably last usually about 6 months in a new expansion. There's people that don't even last that long. I know some people tell me that after a month they give up. And then there's other people that last a year, or they last the entire 2 years and they wait for the next expansion. So I think they're going to take a happy medium, and after about a year, that's when they're going to come out with the next major classic release, whatever you want to call it. So I think that's what we've got to look forward to over the next 5 or 6 years. Now, as far as a release date, I've been beating the drum of November 23rd, 2019 since they announced vanilla. People have been asking in my stream, when is Classic coming out? And I keep harping on that. I think it's too good of an opportunity for them to not use that date, the 15-year anniversary of when vanilla or Classic was, or the original World of Warcraft was released. And I still think that there's a very good chance that it's going to be that long. Now, having said that, the fact that I am of the opinion that they've been using the second prototype now for at least 8 months. I think it could come out sooner. I don't think they need that much time to re-enter in all the data and stuff like that, because they already know what the game is going to be. They've just got to basically reorganize the data and stuff primarily, right? But now that they've learned how to do this, they can very quickly come out with the next expansion, or Burning Crusade, whenever they decide to, World of Warcraft. But being that I'm a firm believer that they've been playing with the second prototype now for at least 8 or 9 months, it could come out quite a bit sooner than that date. I'm going to stick with my gun. I'm going to stick to my guns, though. I'm going to still say November 23rd, 2019. I had also said that I don't think they'll make that official announcement until Blizzard or BlizzCon that same month. So I believe BlizzCon is usually the first weekend of November every year, or it usually has been. And in 2019, I believe BlizzCon would fall on November 1st and 2nd. If not, it would be a week later. But I believe it would be at that BlizzCon where they'll announce the release date of the Classic servers. And then starting on November 23rd, 2019 is when you'll actually be able to start playing. That actually falls on a Saturday. So everybody's going to be able to jump online. Hopefully their servers are ready for it. Much more, I'm sure they're much more prepared than the initial release. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm sure all of you guys are as well. Now, I do think there's I have the opinion that there is a good chance it'll be released earlier now. Based on this information here, I do think that there's a good chance that it'll be released earlier than the date that I'd previously given. But I do not think it's going to be near the release date of the expansion. So if the expansion is in August, I think the earliest we might see Classic WoW is maybe January or January of the following of 2019. So I'm saying between January of 2000. That's like almost a full year I'm giving you guys. What way to narrow down that date there, Alodar. But I think that's the earliest they'll do it. I still think it's going to be later than that, though. I don't think they're going to try and have them compete as little as possible, but they're going to space it out enough to a point where people would normally have just started to really drop off on their subscription. They'll probably wait a month after that, and then that's when they'd release it, because they don't want people to actually drop off their subscription. They want people to go, it's only another month until Classic's released. I may as well keep my subscription active. So they want to keep that revenue going, right? So anyways, I'm really looking forward to Classic. You guys all know that I've watched my stream. I've got the shirt to prove it. I can't wait till it comes out. This has really kind of hyped me up again and gotten me going, but I'm glad that they came out with this little update here. I'm looking forward to more updates like these. I would expect that we're probably not going to see another one until after, at least a couple of months after Battle for Azeroth. So it's probably going to be another 5, maybe 6 months, probably BlizzCon, to be honest, when we get another update like this. But this small little bit of information actually does give us a lot more information than if you kind of read into where they're going here. So I'm very happy with a lot of things that they've said here. It's very obvious that they really want to make Classic. That's good news for all of us. And I'm going to try not to be so pessimistic with Blizzard. I think they understand where people lie. There's two sides of the fence. One side that really likes the current version of the game, and people that really like the old version of the game, and they're gonna try and milk us for everything that they possibly can revenue wise, and you can't blame them. They're a corporation. So, but that's good news. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want more, if you enjoyed the video, if you thought it was informative, whatever, feel free to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button. I stream several nights a week. And I'll be coming out with more content for Classic World of Warcraft as it comes out. So thanks a lot. Have a good day, and I'll talk to you soon.